Hello, everyone, and welcome to Land Matters, the podcast of the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. I'm your host, Anthony Flint. Consider Minnesota, the crown of the Midwestern states, a place that has pioneered many things: Scotch tape, the first toaster, the Mall of America. Well, add to that one more, taking the lead in zoning reform for more affordable housing. Minneapolis was the first city in the country to abolish single-family-only zoning, which means a duplex or a triplex or any kind of greater density is allowed now on all residential parcels. The idea is to increase supply with more affordable varieties of housing rather than just the single-family home, which of course tends to be more expensive. Dozens of cities across the U.S. followed suit in a quest for more density in multifamily housing in places where the single-family home has been dominant. Is it working? For this episode of the Land Matters podcast, we sat down with the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, to talk about that and more. The City of Lakes was the site of the American Planning Association's National Planning Conference this year, and a delegation from the Lincoln Institute was there. The story of how Frey came to Minneapolis is a good one. He grew up in Northern Virginia and went to the College of William and Mary on a track scholarship. After graduating with a degree in government, he started running professionally while attending law school at Villanova in Philadelphia. That's when he came to Minneapolis to run the Twin Cities Marathon, and as he tells it, fell in love with the city. The day after graduating, he drove the 1,200 miles west to Minneapolis, his new chosen home. He started as an employment and civil rights attorney, became an active community organizer, served on the city council, and was elected mayor in 2017, promptly faced with COVID and the police murder of George Floyd in 2020. He was reelected in 2021 and continued to address police and race relations, and indeed race and equity became a bigger part of the story of the lack of affordable housing, as he talked about how exclusive zoning has created a de facto segregation. Here's our conversation, held in a spare and modest corner office in a government building across from City Hall, which is being renovated. Minneapolis has kind of been a pioneer in zoning reform and banning single-family-only zoning. How's it going? How much housing has been built? Are prices and rents coming down? And can you talk a little bit about whether increasing supply is a good path to affordability?
There are two critical paths that you need to take simultaneously to achieve affordability. The first is subsidy. It's bridging the gap between whatever constitutes the market rate and the affordable rate. It's making sure that people who are experiencing homelessness have that next rung on the ladder to pull themselves out. That side of the equation can't be achieved in full simply through supply. It requires some government intervention. And you need supply. In order to have a healthy housing ecosystem, you need to make sure that the supply of housing is coming close to matching what the demand is. If you have a whole lot of people that want to live in a great city and you don't have the supply to accommodate it, the prices will continue to go up, and they'll continue to go up across the board. And so about 10 years ago, when I first took office as a city council member, I said very clearly that we were going to go to war on surface parking lots. We were going to dramatically add supply and density, and we did so. Couple that then with a comprehensive plan, which, as you mentioned, got rid of single-family exclusive zoning, allowing for duplexes and triplexes in residential neighborhoods, allowing for that missing middle to get put up, and then also adding additional density and height along commercial corridors. And with all of those things, with the affordability component, the subsidy, plus the supply side, you have reached an equation that has allowed Minneapolis to keep rents down more than just about any other major city in the country. Other cities were seeing double-digit, even 30% rental increases, where we were keeping our rent increases to 1% and 2%. That's with a whole lot of new people moving in. That's with downtown being a place that everybody wants to be, and North Loop rocking. We've dramatically increased that supply, and it's helped a whole lot. And I can add on to talk about the comprehensive plan if you're interested in that too.
Yeah, sure. This would be a good time.
So we have maps at the city dating back 100 years that quite literally designate North Minneapolis as a slum for blacks and Jews. And when you overlay that with restrictive covenants that run with the land, with intentional segregation, intentionally separating communities from some of their most vital resources like the riverfront, downtown, or the rest of the city by large highways or a ton of industrial, you get the dynamic that we see even today, which is an intense segregation and are some of these gaps that we have throughout the city, whether that's gaps in employment, opportunity gaps, educational gaps, home ownership gaps between black people and white people. And for years, we were operating under these fairly prescriptive zoning ordinances that explicitly said we're going to keep the blacks and the Jews over in one portion of the city. Then during the Civil Rights Act, that became illegal to do explicitly. We then started to do the same stuff implicitly through the zoning code, making it so that unless you could own a huge home on a huge parcel, you couldn't live in huge swaths of the city. The tails of those decisions continued to basically present day. And we wanted to push back on that. We're not against single-family homes. We're not even against mansions. You want to have your mansion, you can have your mansion. But what we're saying is that in addition to being able to have a mansion, you can also divide that mansion up in 2 or 3, that we're going to promote missing middle along these corridors that allows us to add to a supply. And what we're going for is to allow a diversity of housing options in every neighborhood and therefore a diversity of people in every neighborhood. And yes, that plan has been working. In the last 3 years, we've built over 1,000 housing units and multifamily buildings on parcels that were formerly missing middle housing or R1 and R2. These were parcels that previously would only allow, in most part, a single-family home, and we've been adding 8 and 10 and 20 units. We've been adding dramatically to our skyline, literally creating some tall buildings where you got a whole lot of people in them. And we've seen a whole lot of progress, and then we got sued. And we've been going through litigation for quite some time. We're going to ultimately win this fight, whether it's through legislation or it's through the litigation itself. But this is something that's important. It's important to, again, allow for a diversity of people and housing options in every neighborhood. It's important so that you get a true urban city dynamic where everybody has the opportunity to think big and run with a great idea and live in a great city. Everybody should have that opportunity to live in a great city, and we want to create that opportunity for everyone.
For people outside of Minneapolis, who'd you get sued by? And quickly, what was the rationale?
We got sued by a group of people, and without assigning intentions, it was a group of people that said that we were doing something that would harm the environment. And I adamantly disagree. In fact, it's quite the opposite. One of the best ways to improve the environment, one of the best ways to reduce your individual carbon output is by living in a great city. Rather than commuting 45 minutes into work with your own single-family home and picket fence out in the suburbs or even further out, exurbs, you can live in a great and thriving city and you can walk to the grocery store and take your bicycle to work. And if you do take a car, well, it's fewer miles traveled anyway. And it works, not to mention heating costs are down because more people are living in multifamily dwelling units. Indisputably, it's better for the environment if we allow more people to live here. But the suit is largely saying that we should have conducted an environmental review on this comprehensive plan and the total potential build-out of it, which is never going to happen. I mean, let's be real here. We can't assume that every single building downtown is going to be 100 stories tall and every single-family home is going to be a triplex because that is never going to happen. We've seen some modest improvements. We've seen some buildings converted, but the way they were asking us to calculate this build-out is not operating in reality, and so we've been fighting it and pushing back. And like I said, we're going to win this one way or another because it means a lot to a lot of people. It's important, and we want to help.
Turning now to transit and mobility, how are you achieving your vision for sustainable mobility in such a historically, or at least over the last half century at least, bit of a car-dependent metropolis? How can you change that culture? Do you think that culture is changing? And do most people still drive and park downtown?
Our city was built out at a time when people were largely dependent on cars. And to the extent it was built out prior to that time period, the streets and the grids were shifted to make them car-centric. Yeah, of course, we recognize that cars are a way that people get around, but we want to add to a diversity, a cornucopia of transportation options that makes it so that people can safely and comfortably take their bike to work, that people, regardless of their skill, are able to bike in. We want to make it so that pedestrians feel comfortable and, in fact, are prioritized. We want to add public transportation, not just as an option that's available occasionally, but a convenient one, getting from point A to point B. That requires us to add out a whole bunch of additional tools. We're known as one of the most, if not the most, bike-friendly city in the entire country, notwithstanding the fact that, the winters can get kind of cold here. It's amazing. People bundle up, they'll throw on a face mask, they'll put some snow pants over their slacks, and they'll bike into work on a big fat tire. I've seen people cross-country skiing into work. Haven't yet seen anybody ice skating, but I have a feeling like that's coming next. We're proud. We're outdoorsy. We are building out our transportation network in a way that, again, makes it more convenient, adding bus rapid transit wherever we can. We've seen a dramatic uptick in the number of BRT lines that are coming to fruition. And over the last 15 years, Minneapolis has grown by about 50,000 people, yet the total vehicle miles traveled and the gas emissions have gone down. So 50,000 more people, yet the total, not even the per capita, the total number of vehicle miles have gone down that are traveled by car. That shows that the work that we're doing is making a difference. And at the same time, we recognize that, there are people that are going to take cars, and we're going to try to make even those cars as sustainable as possible through electric vehicle charging stations, which we are adding on. And right now, we're at a good course and adding, bus-specific transit lanes as well, so that you can take the bus and whip by some traffic that you would otherwise be sitting in. These are just a list of things that we've been doing, and it's making a difference.
What is your assessment of land-based financing to fund transit, redevelopment, affordable housing, and parks? The idea here, of course, as you know, is that government action and investments create value in private land and development. So isn't it possible to harness some portion of that, in some cases, very dramatic increase in value and sort of plow it back into the community? Are you a value capture fan?
I think it's not smart to either be pro-value capture, pro-TIF, or anti-value capture, anti-TIF. It is a very important tool, and it's one that needs to be balanced. You don't want to take all of the properties off of the tax rolls, otherwise you can't do the critical needs of a city, like filling the potholes and having firefighters and police and making sure that people are healthy and drinking clean water. You need that. And there is a way to enhance a city by using the tools such as value capture and TIF to achieve wonderful structures and buildings and transportation options that would not happen but for that government intervention. And so there's a long history of this pendulum that is TIF or value capture swinging violently back and forth. And you need to strike a balance. There are some moments, again, where you've got every property that could potentially be used getting TIF, and that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. Many of those buildings would have gone up anyway. But if you're using it in the right way, it could be huge. And we have been using it in a number of different ways, including one of the most popular policy moves I'd say we've done in the last few years, which is to knock down this old Kmart. So to take you back 40, 50 years, whatever it was, there was a policy decision made to block off Nicollet Avenue and put a big Kmart in a huge parking lot in the middle of it. It would be somewhat unfair to me to question decisions that were made at that time, because I'm sure 40 years from now, there are decisions that I will have made that turn out to be not so smart. But this is one of the worst, in my opinion, urban planning decisions that was made in our city. And so we found ways to get land control over that former Kmart. We are knocking the building down. We're opening up the street and breathing new life into this important artery. And we're making sure that everything is there, from a park to affordable housing to commercial to market rate. It allows the flow of entrepreneurship and new business growth that we've seen on that corridor to expand south and north. A big part of what we're using to achieve this large-scale goal is value capture. about $7 million per year that we can utilize not just for the purchase of parcels, but even potentially the development or subsidy of these structures to create this big, beautiful vision in an area that has been kind of choked off. Again, to conclude where I began, I don't think anybody should be pro or anti these tools. It is a tool. It is a tool that should be used, but it's also a tool that shouldn't be used every single time there's a new building that goes up or a new opportunity to be had. It's got to be a balance.
We've been reading a task force looking at changes to the Metropolitan Council. In what ways is this pioneering arrangement, I think it's safe to call it that, working? And can it or should it be replicable, this idea of Twin Cities and regional governance? What's working about regional governance here?
You can't think about any city as living in a vacuum. Mayor Carter and I joke that it's not like we just protect the water on our side of the Mississippi River. We share it. Likewise, we share an economy that doesn't end where the street ends and the boundary starts. We operate in Minnesota. Granted, Minneapolis is the best, the most beautiful, and the most extraordinary city in the whole world. And certainly we are in the state as well, but we recognize that there's other great places too, and we got to work together with them. Working together with them is easier said than done. And that's not due to personality, that's just due to the structure. I've got a responsibility to the city of Minneapolis, and it helps to have a governing body that has a regional focus, and they're doing that as a consistent job. And so obviously there's always a balance to strike between getting a job done and accountability on the other end. And at the same time, we've got a Metropolitan Council that is appointed largely by the governor that helps us put up light rail that goes through a number of different municipalities. It helps us design bus rapid transit. It helps pay for a Metropolitan Transit Police. To have that regional focus is not just important, I think it's crucial to really furthering a regional mindset and goal.
We can't resist. What's your view on skyways? Current practices suggest that, it's all about the street and activity at the street level. Is there a conflict there because it drains away that potential for activity at the street level? I imagine you're thinking of some combination of skyways and street level, but tell us a little bit about the urban design part of your job.
Yes, if there's a conflict, of course there's a conflict. If you've got 100,000, 200,000, whatever the number is of people coming downtown to a city and you've got two levels of activity, you're splitting whatever number it is between those two levels. Sure, it'd be kind of cool if I had the ability to mandate that if the temperature is above 35 degrees, then everybody goes outside. If it's below 35 degrees, then everybody goes in the skyway. That's a joke, by the way. I recognize the reality. There's a few months in Minneapolis where it's really freaking cold. I use the skyways. Do I like the splitting of activity? Of course I don't. Nobody does. I'd rather have a concentration of all that bustle and excitement and vibrancy all on one level, of course. But during the months where it's cold, I go in the skyway and I grab a sandwich and I don't feel guilty about it. In fact, I'm really pumped to see the small local business owners that are operating in it. It's a reality of the climate and where we're at. Other downsides, of course. You deal with them. You also find new ways of activating the space. Skyways themselves have been hit particularly hard in the last few years because of a decrease in the number of workers that come downtown on an annual basis. There's more people that are working remotely or some form of hybrid, and with that, there's fewer people hitting that sandwich shop up. And I've been saying that I will not take any more criticism about the lack of vibrancy downtown or somebody's favorite sandwich shop closing from the person that's sitting on their couch at home in the suburbs. If you care, then you should be supporting that sandwich shop. If you want to see vibrance and want to see more foot traffic, well, your feet should be adding to that traffic. We are increasing the numbers pretty dramatically right now. People are definitely coming back, but it's not happening all in one big burst.
And a couple days a week, that's okay as far as you're concerned, perhaps to begin with?
Well, look, I'm a work in-person guy. I believe in in-person work. My staff is in 5 days a week. Of course, we're very flexible. I don't think I've ever said no if you need to go and take care of something even last minute. We are very, very flexible. But at the same time, I think there is personal incentive of being in person with your boss. I think that there's more vertical mobility if you're able to see somebody there doing the work in person, in real time, and you're building out a culture. That's something obviously that I support.
It's become a bit of a cliche, but there really is no substitute for being in the office. I experienced that myself. You run into people, you get things done quickly. There's no confusion about email.
It's the unplanned interactions that ultimately help. I mean, how many jobs have you got based on a coincidence? I mean, I'm largely in Minneapolis because of a coincidence. You meet somebody, you get a job, get an interview, you find a great city that you fall in love with. These things only happen because you were there to have it happen to you.
Mayor Frey, thank you very much for this conversation.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Jacob Frey, Mayor of Minneapolis. That was our interview recorded live in Minneapolis, again as part of our engagement at the American Planning Association National Planning Conference. A lightly edited version of this interview will be available online and ultimately in print in Landlines magazine as the latest installment of Mayor's Desk, the series of Q&As with mayors from around the world, now also available as a book compilation, Mayor's Desk, 20 Conversations with Local Leaders Solving Global Problems. Just go to our homepage. It's lincolninst.edu. Also on social media, the handle is @landpolicy. At APA, by the way, Jacob Frey joined two other mayors from legacy cities, Aftab Pureval, mayor of Cincinnati, and Paige Cognetti, mayor of Scranton, Pennsylvania, for a standing room-only panel discussion of what's working and what's not in the world of urban affairs and in all of these great cities trying to make a comeback from population loss and disinvestment. Our work in legacy cities can also be found at lincolninst.edu. So come along with us as we keep talking to all the most innovative and interesting municipal leaders we can find, all of them working hard and making change in cities large and small. Finally, don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to the Land Matters podcast if you like what you hear. I'm Anthony Flint. Bye for now.